Okay. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining our very first podcast. So excited to have our very first podcast, and thank you for taking the time to join us. I'm A. Yvette Myrick, Dr. A. Yvette Myrick, but everybody just calls me Yvette. Okay, let's just get that out the way already. I'm not into the whole formal titles, but since it's our first podcast, just wanted to say welcome and so excited you all could join us about this exciting topic that we're going to talk about service and diversity. And I'm here with,
My name is Dr. Estelle Young, and like Yvette, informal, I go by Estelle. And I am incredibly excited to be here today with my dear friend Yvette and talking about this incredibly important topic of diversity, which is either going to, which is going to, lift us up and make us more, even more empowered. So excited to be here.
yeah. And Estelle said, this is such a relevant topic for today. And one of the reasons why we chose this topic is so important, diversity, not just in higher education, but all around. So we are so excited to have you and ready to get started. Let's get started. We're so excited to have today with us a dear friend and colleague of mine. I've known her for a number of years, and we will get a little bit into that a little bit later, her bio and everything else. But let's go ahead and bring on Lizbeth Jacobs. Hi, Lisbeth.
Welcome,
Hello.
Lisbeth.
Hi.
Hi. So excited that you could join us today. Welcome, Lisbeth.
Hi. I'm happy to be here.
So, Lisbeth, we go way back. Well, not as way back as Estelle and I go. We've known each other maybe 15, 20 years, Estelle and I. But yeah, probably has it been about maybe 15? No, I mean 15 years, Estelle. Trying to think of
15
how.
years. Mhm.
Yeah, 15
Wow.
years. And the way I felt about you when I first met Estelle, the connection, I feel the same way about Lisbeth. We met years ago, maybe about 5 years ago, when we were both working at a college here in Colorado. So I just had that sense of connection, and we just been following each other. Our careers have taken different turns, but we stayed connected. The same way with Estelle and I. We've gone on to different careers and different jobs, but sometimes when you make that connection, you really want to stay in contact with those people. So really excited to have Lisbeth here. How are things going before we get to your formal introduction? How you doing, Lisbeth?
Doing great. Thank you.
Well, you look
Yeah,
great.
thank you. It's a lot of the touch up screen and Zoom.
I know. Well,
Maximum touch up.
you have to share more about that with me because I'm not into that. I don't have the glam spa to put everything together, so I had to do my own makeup. And who knows, maybe one day we'll get to that point, Estelle, where we have our own makeup people and a stylist and everything like that. But for today, we had to do it ourselves. So stay safe.
DIY.
So, Lisbeth, I know a lot about you, but let's introduce you to our viewers out there. So, Lisbeth Jacobs has worked as an adjunct instructor for HSE and GED. So, HSE is high school equivalency, and she received her bachelor's in English from the University of Maryland University College, the European division of is that Heidelberg? Did I say that
Hi-
German?
Heidelberg.
Heidelberg, Germany. And at Harvard, very impressive, Harvard Extension and Summer School since 2017. She graduated with a graduate certificate in social justice. And that's why one of the reasons why we was like, let's bring on Lisbeth, social justice, and has been a research assistant and teaching fellow. She is currently conducting her master's thesis research in the science of diversity. Another great reason for our topic about diversity today. Lisbeth has currently, she has taught ESL for diverse population in Japan, Germany, and the United States. So she has a vast experience in the States and abroad. Passionate from an early age, she's been involved in social justice, adult career pathways, and adult education. So welcome, Lisbeth. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for
and
having me.
taking time out from working on your master's thesis. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that. I see you have the science of diversity. I know we have some things we wanted to talk about, but can you just tell us why you chose that, the science of diversity?
Well, the science of diversity is just a method of looking at diversity, and I think more of a holistic perspective, as than something that encompasses the individual, all facets of the individual, their conscience, their unconscious, their biology. And so when learning about diversity, it's really important to learn about it from this perspective, because it makes, in general, people, if you can understand yourself, you can understand others a little bit better. And I think it puts the onus on the person, on understanding the self, rather than expecting someone else to get along with you. Rather, you learn how to get along with someone else based on what you know about yourself.
Hmm.
And so I'm contrasting that to other approaches out there that are more explicitly, um, I think if you're thinking about science, you don't think science as being judgmental. You think about science as being more even handed, and there being a process of thought, of scientific thought. So if you have that perspective that science is more dispassionate, that is not that the people that are doing science don't have passions and like, and things that they like, but there is a process in the thought and the discipline. And so if you look at it that way, it's a little bit easier to go at diversity from a scientific perspective. I mean, it's not easier in that it is more complete, because there's a lot of things that sometimes might be out of our um, expertise, like how is the eye, does the eye process what you see, and how does that go back to your brain, and what receptors and all that stuff. That more scientific stuff might be a little bit more highbrow for some, but you don't get the sense that you're going to be judged for how you think or how you feel. And so it's a little bit of a, I think, um, simpler method to view diversity as opposed to traditional approaches
Hmm.
that tend to be more on the judgmental side, and or tend to have it, whatever approach to diversity a lot of times has an agenda. And since the people are sophisticated and smart enough to know what's behind that agenda. And so that makes a lot of diversity training suspect.
Hmm.
Where if you're coming at it from a scientific point of view, that layer, I mean, these things are so complicated, but at least that layer is removed. And so that's what's making me look at this approach a little bit more closely.
Hmm. Well, it sounds very interesting, especially the part like you had mentioned a few times about, removing the judgmental part, and looking at the science behind it. So I definitely look forward to one day reading about all your research and your research paper. It sounds very interesting. So,
Me too.
yeah. And I know, and working on it, when I was working on my master's thesis and doing the research, it's a lot. But then when you see it and when it's finished and it's done and you have that wealth of knowledge behind you, you can share with other people. It's so rewarding because you put the work into it. You put the research
Mhm.
into it, you put the writing behind it, and you share it. And it's going to make a great contribution to our field when you finish. So, yeah,
Thank
please
you.
share with Estelle and I. We would love to see your finished product with that.
Thank
So,
you.
thank you. And I was going to say, well, Lisbeth is like me. Don't get us fooled. We are people who are in our field of education, higher education, but we love to have fun and enjoy ourselves. So Lisbeth know that I love to have fun, and Lisbeth loves to have fun. So when y'all see us on this podcast, yeah, we all together and formal, but we love to have a good time. I think. Do I have this? just to give an example, this is, you remember this, Lisbeth? Where was this
I
taken?
do. Yeah, the Luna Fest. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And that was a good cause to raise
Hmm.
funds for domestic violence, women going through that. So you see that we all enjoy ourselves and love to have fun. So, I think you could do both. I think you can go in higher education and make some contributions like Lisbeth is doing through her research, and at the same time have a good time, right? And have a good cause. It's was a very good cause that. So I just wanted to ask you a few questions, and thank you so much again for taking time out of
Hmm.
your schedule to join us. So in
Sure.
your experience, I know you, like you said, you worked internationally and here in the States. How would you define a diverse workplace? When you go into a workplace, that's great. They hire you, you know some of the people from your interview, and maybe you get a chance to check out the organization before you say, yes, I take the job. But when you start a job, how would you look at the job and say, okay, this is pretty diverse? Do you define it by the race, ethnicity, age, social economic status, or how would you say, okay, I'm working in a diverse workplace, or no, there's some things they may need to do to bring more diversity to this workplace?
I think that a diverse workplace reflects its community at large, and it represents every member of the community, not just some members of the community. So I really look at the diverse workplace as one that has a little bit of everything. We're talking gender, religion, uh, sexual orientation, um, color. Um, I think that gender, I think I said maybe not yet,
Mhm.
um, but one that uh, diversity is life, you know. Um, so if you think about diversity, we're talking about every single organism in the the sphere. And so if you're thinking about a diverse workplace, it also has to reflect the sphere in which you're operating. So that means everyone should be represented.
Mhm. Thank you. Some good points there. And what if you go into a place and there's no diversity? They're not representing the community. Different people, like you said, based on it could be gender or um, race or anything like that. What suggestions will you have for to talk to someone about the people and resources needed to bring about diversity in the workplace?
Well, I just spent the Friday, just this Friday, in a webinar, an all-day webinar. It was actually open to the public, but it was sponsored by the IRA Project, and that is the Institutional Anti-Racism and Accountability Project, which is a newly formed initiative at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, at their Shorenstein Center. And their goal is to use research and policy to promote anti-racism as a core value and an institutional norm. So this is where things are getting, I think, a little bit more specific these days, because diversity and inclusion work, as they say, it's very important. But right now, I think that we're talking about two should be anti-racism work because of the institutional um, origin of it, because we know that this what is going on these days, and if you see a um, organization that is not diverse, there's probably some processes and structural things that are rooted in traditions of racial exclusion or privilege, which discriminate based on group disparities. And that's and what we're talking about spills over to women, to people from different genders. Um, so it's intertwined. Um, and so, what I would say though is that you really have to take a look at your organization. And it's something that they were talking about, and they were talking about the plumbing and the poem. The poem is the lofty um, goals of every organization, that they want to have a diverse workplace, or that they want to have a diverse and inclusive workplace. That's the poem. But where's your plumbing? How are you making it so that your structures that are built for that? For example, we have technology these days, and houses are now built with USB plugs, now. I know we all have connectors as well, but now houses are being built with USB plugs, with an incredible amount of spaces in the walls to make technology wireless. The houses now are going through a lot of where you're building for that technology. And so you have to build for that. You have to build your organization for diversity and inclusion. So it's not just about the poem, the lofty goals and what we would like to see, but it's also about really taking a hard look at your structures and what things are in place in order to bring about that diverse workplace. So it is not just it is a little bit more complicated and has more layers than just having the impetus of saying, oh, we just want a diverse workplace.
Mm. That's really interesting. I didn't think about it like that before because I've worked at several colleges and jobs where they do have a mission statement or a vision statement that includes diversity. You know, we want a diverse population of students and faculty and staff, or that's their vision. Or like you said, that could be their goals, to create a diverse workplace. But it's the wording. And I've always said, and you probably heard me say this before, actions speak louder than words. So when
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about the plumbing and the structure of it, that puts behind, this is really important. Not only are we going to put the words out there, we're going to do actions behind it. We're going to set up a structure to meet these goals, these lofty goals, as you said, for diversity. And you're right, things are changing. If they weren't, we wouldn't have the lights. We have the electricity. We'd be back with the candles back in the day. So as you said, people are building homes now that have the USB already built into those homes because they know that's the future and that's the direction we're going in. So why can't we do that in the workplace? If we want a diverse workplace, why can't we build that structure to put things in place, to have that happen? So I think that's something really important, not just the words, but the actions behind it. So if a college is saying that, this is our mission, this is our vision, these are our goals, that's great. So what kind of structures are you putting in place to make that happen? What are the systems that you're putting in place to make that happen? Don't just give us, the standard statement that you put it out there. What are some things you're actually doing behind that statement? So I think that's a really good point. And maybe at the end, if that webinar is, as you said, is to the public, maybe we can include that. Maybe we can edit it in if anybody is one can go back and look at that webinar. Is that
Yeah,
something that people can go back and look at the webinar?
I don't have the link yet. They were going to send a link of the recorded sessions to the participants. So I don't have that link yet, but I can definitely make it available as soon as I receive it. But yeah, it was, I think there were like 1,000 registrants, maybe
Wow.
300 at a time attended.
Mm,
Um, the president of Prairie View A&M
mm,
University was a keynote speaker. Um, they had people like the global lead on diversity and inclusion from Google was there as one of the panelists.
mm,
So there were a lot of people that are leaders in the field that
mm,
were present at the webinar. So yeah.
mm. And it's great to hear that support. So I can get more into what someone had recently said about diversity not being a good thing, diversity training not being a good thing, but I totally disagree that we need that training, we need that dialogue, we need those discussions going on, for diversity. If people not talking about it, you're not going to have people sharing ideas and those strategies that need to be put in place. So thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Sort of tied on what you just talked about, the need of diversity and what people could do. How can organizations, I guess, connect to the community? So if you have, it doesn't have to be higher education, but that's really key because higher education is just about in most communities have a college or a university or somewhere, or even online. Now that's the big thing, especially with what's going on, having it online. But how could we connect to the community? Because instead of separating, like, okay, here's the organization, here's the college, and then, oh, we happen to be located in the community. How can we connect more with the community to say we want to partner, we want to work together, we want to collaborate to bring diversity to our workplace? What do you see as a key stakeholder of the community being involved in this as well?
Well, we should all be involved because it takes a village, right?
Mhm.
And so every part of um, every person should be involved in education, if not as a pipeline person, but maybe as a worker person, or um, have some kind of connection to that educational institution, seeing the institutional as a hub for the community instead of existing outside of the community, but being a hub within the community, a hub for connection, a hub for the exchange of ideas. For example, and I think that it it can work both ways. How can the community itself use an institutional organization as well, to um, be woven into that community? Um, I think that if you have town hall meetings, that they should occur at the university, or at the college.
Mm,
Um, Civic duties or civic events might might take place in the college. So it's not an entity that we just see up in the hill somewhere,
mhm,
but it's a place where we know, we're familiar with,
mhm,
and we know the people that work there. And um, so it's got to be um, both a two-way street. And I
mhm,
think that businesses can go to universities and ask for people, what kind of people they need, what kind of training is lacking, and making that a partnership between business and education. Um, Not just that, but also you have to see yourself, like I said before, reflected into that community. And if that community is not seeing itself reflected in the people that work there, they're not going to want to be part of that
mhm,
place as well. So there's got to be meaningful connections between both, the community and the college or university. And they can be um, interdependent. They don't
mhm,
have to be independent from each other.
mhm,
But it does take a lot of planning. And again, it's back to, you have to take a look at your plumbing, right?
mhm,
And so how are you designing those processes? How are you designing your departments to interact with the community at large? Are you giving people um, out in human resources enough resources for themselves to be out and about in the community? Is that Are you wanting to foment those relationships? How does the college see itself as an actor in the community?
mhm,
So it has to do with the will of the college or university
mhm,
as well.
mhm. Thank you. And that's a good point, to invite the community to be part of the college and having some meetings there. So it won't be seen as a separate entity. And I think that's really important. And who knows, the college may bring more students and when they become comfortable and see the staff and the people that work there or their children, encourage their children to go to college. So it's all connected there together. So I think you're right. It should be a two-way street and a partnership, and it should not be separate. But together, we all have common goals. We want the common things for each other, for everyone to have a productive life, a meaningful life, and to contribute to the community. So I think those are really good points. So thank you.
Yeah. And reaching out to every member of the community as well is very important. The other thing that Harvard is doing right now is I don't know the name of the project, but it's a long name. I don't have it in front of me, but it's another initiative and another commission that they're having to revise the signage and what the artwork and the campus looks like. Does it reflect the community at large? Does it reflect the people who go to the university? Do you see yourself mirrored in that educational institution? Is there a place for you and your culture in that institution? So again, part of redesigning, the DNA of your institution, it's big because it encompasses all aspects. It's not just, again, the poetry, but you really have to work on those structures.
Mm, thank you. Well, hey, I don't want to take up all the time. I know Estelle is excited to have you join us as well. Estelle, do you have any questions for Elizabeth?
I sure do. And I wanted to say, Lisbeth is sharing so much about diversity, but this is just a thumbnail sketch of what she knows. And Yvette actually interviewed her for our book, Thriving in Higher Education Careers. So, and in fact, this podcast cast really, kind of bounces off from the book. So if you're interested in hearing more about what Lisbeth has to say, it's you
Get
can,
our
yeah,
book.
yeah, you can find it in the book. But yeah, I'm really intrigued by the mentions about diversity, uh, research-based diversity, and the fact that it's really starts with self-reflection, and then also this notion of the importance of the plumbing.
Mhm.
And in that regard, could you talk a little bit about implicit bias training and where that fits?
Yeah, it's a complicated issue because right now, and one of the focus of that conference that I was talking about was about what's working and what is not working. And when you talk about the trainings, a lot of these trainings are not working right now, in spite of having been in place for many years. We are where we are. We know the moment we're at the moment in which we find ourselves, seeing ourselves in the mirror, seeing that there's a lot of that there is structural racism and structural um, uh, processes in place that prevent a diverse workforce. So there are many reasons why this is so. And so, for example, we can say it depends even in the reason behind the trainings, because the trainings are seen as basically for compliance purposes only. Um, People, workers or employees are not going to respond well to that because it's just about the bottom line, and so they're going to naturally tune out of that conversation because there's no stake in it for them. Are you going to get paid less per hour if you attend this? Well, they're mandatory, but is is it going to really make a difference in your work life if you're seeing that it's done for compliance purposes? Now, I'm not saying that compliance is not important. Compliance is important. That's one of the reasons, one of the main avenues that people have had to make their workplace more fair. And, we do need rules to prevent discrimination and to protect different people. So compliance is important, but how you implement these trainings, the reason why it's even more important, and it goes back to, again, what is the reason behind, is this just a bottom line issue, or do you really want to make your organization more diverse? And do you really want to reach out to the public and your diverse customer base? So, for example, the implicit bias test, if you just plop down a whole bunch of employees taking the implicit bias test, it may bring an awareness of what, of how they might feel, but telling someone that you failed the test is also not a good thing either, because it's just going to perpetuate that bias, and it's going to activate it even more. Because if you find that, oh, well, does it mean I'm a racist, or does it mean that I'm biased or prejudiced? So there's a very fine line between self-awareness and telling someone and pointing the finger at them and saying, oh, well, you're definitely biased. Not to mention that there's 175 biases out there. So taking the test, that's just one test. And, you know, for implicit bias, there's so many other kinds of biases out there. So if you're just taking that AIT or IAT, if you're just taking that IAT, then it may just leave you in the same place, because it doesn't, it'll give you an awareness of where you are. But there are also researchers that are saying that the test does not predict behavior, that the test might just predict that that person is unfamiliar with the stimuli, with those faces, because they just, maybe they don't live in a very diverse town. So seeing the faces in the test might be unfamiliar to them, which might make them respond slower to them, which may indicate that they're more biased against them, when in fact it's a lack of familiarity with that particular sector of the population. So there's proponents one way or the other of whether that kind of training is enough. I don't think that that it is enough. I took it, and I noticed that my speed, if I wasn't doing it right, might be a speed thing that I'm doing on my keyboard that has nothing to do with what I'm looking at. So I think they're helpful tools, but it's again how you use these tools to try to bring awareness. It's how you use them, not exactly about the tool themselves.
Thank you for that point. That's a really good distinction. So we've only got a couple of minutes. Unfortunately, this interview has gone so quickly, but I'm wondering, so you've kind of identified some warning signs about the implicit bias test, but do you know any, you know, good or effective uses of it?
I don't, I'm not an expert at the IAT. I just know that it's a diagnostic test, basically. I think it's a good tool if you want to do it, but even thinking about doing it, it's like, oh, what am I going to find out? That I'm prejudiced? And then what to do with that information? Which is why it's, again, like I said, it's just a tool, and it's how you use that tool to redirect it. So it has to be used in conjunction with something else. Not, you know, it's not an end to the means by itself, I don't think.
Okay, one last question, just really quick, first thing that comes to your mind. In terms of individual fact, we know that institutions are, of course, the most important vehicle for fostering diversity, but individual faculty member or individual student affairs professional, what would be one go-to that you would use to foster diversity?
Well, I think it's education. And I mean, obviously we're in the education business, but I think that always that if you want to work in a diverse workplace, then you have to grow and you have to look into yourself and what things you're doing yourself to grow in that sense. Are you reading books? Are you reading the latest papers that talk about diversity and inclusion efforts? What kinds of what diet of information do you have that that can help you inform your decisions and that can help you grow? And as again, with it comes from the institution, but it does. And institutions are made up of people, so it has to be. You have to have your own motivation for that. And I think that you asking that question, it shows that you're interested in the subject and that you want to do more. And so I think that that's a strong engine to drive these forces around us.
That's terrific. Elizabeth Jacobs, thank you so very much for coming here and sharing your wealth of knowledge about diversity.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're welcome.
thank you so much, Lisbeth. I know we've known each other for many years, but I'm always so amazed at the pearls of wisdom and everything you shared today. I learned so much myself. We don't always get a chance to have these in-depth conversations. So having these with you and this opportunity, so appreciate you taking the time and, just from your recent webinars and things you attended in your research to share that with us. So thank you so much. Hey,
You're
do you want to
welcome.
tell our listeners, thank you, what you're working on, any announcements or anything you want to share with anyone about what you're doing right now? Or
No, I'm I think just working on this thesis thing, and as soon as that gets done, I can breathe again. So I'm working on it.
Well, like I said earlier, what you're doing is so important and so relevant and so needed at this time for now and in the future. So spend your time and dedicate your time to that. That's very important. It's something that we really need. And I just know you have a bright future. And I hope that you'll be able to share that research through webinars, seminars, your job, or any career choices you have shared with the world. What you're doing is very important. So thank you for doing your research. And it's so important. We're going to let you get back to that research. So thank you
Thanks.
so much. And we appreciate your time and learn so much. Thank you for joining our podcast. Very insightful information that I've learned, and I'm sure the listeners have learned as well today.
Thank you. Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Bye bye.
You've also come up with a series of tips about, in the broader sense about diversity. And so, can you share some of those with us?
Sure. And some of these tips are from our book, Thriving in Higher Education. And a lot of the things like Lisbeth shared was so informative. And it's related to some of the tips that we talked about. So it's great that we're all on the same page about the importance of diversity. So one tip is to make it a priority. People say it's important, as Lisbeth, our guest, said earlier. You want to put some actions behind it. So yes, it may be the priority in your mission statement, your value statement, your what you want to do. It may be something as your goals, but make that the priority. People usually put things that are priority important to them at the top of the list. So it has to show to your staff, your employees, your faculty that this is really important. It probably should not be. If you have a list of goals and you have 10 goals, it probably shouldn't be the last goal at the bottom. Make that the number one goal of your organization, that you will have a diverse, inclusive workforce and workplace. So tip number one is to make that the priority, to bring that on board. And when you send that message, you send it to across your college or your organization, And people see that, wow, that's our number one goal here. We're at work, and they see that as important. So that's tip number one. The other tip is tip number two is recruit, recruit, recruit. I hear a lot of people say, well, we don't have a certain population in our community. Um, well, then go out to other communities. Go to different job fairs, journals, really get it out there. Recruit through different media. I know at one college, I believe it was Johns Hopkins University. Well, they do have more money than most people, but they made a priority and they backed it up with money that we're going to put this amount of money into going outside our area and really recruiting. And if you don't have the money, you can write grants. You can get funding. Don't use that as like, well, we don't have the money to do that. Then you find the money. You find it through donations, foundation, or whatever you have to do to really get out there and recruit. I think that's another thing where we had talked about actions speak louder than words is by this is important, this is our priority, and then we're going to recruit and we're going to be diverse in our ways of recruiting. A third thing to do is to allocate resources toward effective diversity initiative. So once again, what are the resources? If you say allocate resources toward effective diversity initiatives, the resources could be in your staff. It doesn't always have to be money. It could be money. It could be where you have to, as I mentioned earlier, write grants or get it through your foundation or fundraising. But the resources could be the people and the staff and say, okay, these are our staff. This is really important. We're going to allocate the training, the staff to do these initiatives, go out in the community, be part of the community. We're going to invite the community on campus, and we're going to allocate these resources towards making it happen. Whatever resources you have, is it a space where someone has wants to have a diversity meeting where you can offer that space at your college for free or something like that instead of charging them? What resources do you have? Is it a building, location, space, people, fund? What resources do you have? And use that toward effective diversity initiatives. So that's really key is looking at the resources you have and how can you make that available toward effective diversity. Tip number four is spread the word. Diversity is good for business. Get actively involved in the community. It could be international outreach. Don't keep that within yourself. Bring awareness. If you believe that diversity is a priority, it's important, you're going to put your resources behind it, let that be known. Put that out there, and your Lisbeth talked about the signage, inviting people to come and do paintings or whatever. Spread the word about this is important to this college or our organization, and we want other people to know. We don't want to keep it hidden that this is our priority. Spread it through your ads, your newspaper, put it all over that we value diversity. We are reaching out to have a more diverse workplace. So spread the word, let people know this is a priority, and put it out there for others to see. And then the last tip that I want to share is become a culture that embraces diversity. So you want to create a culture in which all the employees feel respected and valued and appreciated. So it's one thing if you do all this, it's in your mission statement, your value statement, you put in structures in place. As Elizabeth said, like the plumbing, you putting all that in place, you spreading the word, you got the resources. Now you have the diverse workplace, right? You have people coming to work for you. But once they're there, do they feel valued? Do they feel respected? Do they feel appreciated? If not, you're going to lose those people you worked so hard to get. So if they get there and there's no culture where they feel valued, if they feel like when they say something, they're not being heard, they're not being appreciated, and then they may start to think it's because I'm different, and that's why people are not listening to me or I'm not being promoted. So you work so hard to get this diverse population, then what are you doing as far as the culture to help people to feel appreciated that they are part of the value of the business, of the company, the college, whatever it is? What culture do you have? Because if not, It's almost like in higher education, as we know, a lot of people do recruitment. They go out to get students. And then once the students come, if you don't put certain things in place, you're going to lose those students, and that affects your retention rate, right? If you go through all this, you have the people going all over the United States to get students to come to your college. And then once the students show up for the first day, they're all excited. I heard these great things about this college, so now I'm starting this college. And then they get disappointed when they're there, like, okay, I think I'm gonna drop out or stop out or go somewhere else to another college. So, what are you doing to change that culture where people feel valued and respected and appreciated? I think that's really important as well. So, these are 5 tips. In our book, we it could have been 100, but then that would be a 3-part series, volumes of books that we will write. There are a lot of other tips and suggestions out there, but these are 5 tips that we wanted to share today with you all.
So thank you, Yvette, and thanks for really expressing those tips, both in terms of the poetry and the, outlining some of the plumbing.
Yeah, definitely. So we're really excited. I know we only have a few minutes left, but we want to thank Lisbeth again for joining us. And thank you all for joining us, the listeners and the viewers, on our first podcast, Diversity in Service. And really excited that you all were able to participate. This is something that Estelle and I feel very closely passionate about, and that is something that's so needed not only in higher education but in other areas as well. And before we talk about what's going to come up next, Estelle, any final words?
Yeah, I just want to say that the overall purpose of this podcast is to provide tips that are kind of manageable, that we can all we understand, they're meaningful for us, and that we can pick and choose, but all of them will remind us of why we entered the career in higher education in the first place. So diversity and the whole notion of making sure that people are included and then making sure that they're welcome is certainly an essential component to thriving in higher education. Making sure that everyone thrives in higher education. So our next podcast, we're bringing in another special colleague, uh, and he is a master in various things that he's going to share his his tricks. He's a master collaborator. He's an amazing mentor, and he's also extremely resourceful. So we're very excited to welcome Mr. Bill Carson to the next podcast.
Yeah. And I'm excited about that too, and the topic collaboration. And that's one of the great ways that Estelle and I have stayed connected all these years, 15 years, is all our collaborations that we've done. As you all know, those people that know us very well and have read our book, we collaborate on so many things. The blog that we did together, and then our book, and now the podcast. And so we are, as I always said, actions speak louder than words. So we don't just write about collaboration in our book, we actually live it, our actions, by our collaborations that we've done over the years. So I am looking forward to that as well. And hopefully everyone will have a chance to join us about collaboration. It is so key. You cannot do it by yourself. Careers or whatever you want to do, college or whatever, you need that support. And it's how when you can collaborate with someone. So I'm excited about the next podcast as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. All
We'll
right.
see you
Well,
next time.
thank you, everyone. Bye. See you later.